Welcome back. Anti-Black racism in the Muslim community is a lived reality for many Black Muslims. To explore this issue, we are joined today by two guests, Samia Abdi, co-founder of Aspire to Lead, a young professionals network for East African Canadians, and Kofi Achampong, a lawyer by profession and co-organizer of the Black Muslim Initiative. Let's learn more about their experiences and the work they're doing to address the issue of anti-Black racism. Kofi, Samia, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to get right into, some of your personal stories and your experiences addressing or dealing with racism within your community. So Samia, let's start with you. Tell me a little bit about what does anti-Black racism look like in your life, or has it looked like over the years?
So Alhamdulillah, thank God, I've been in a very privileged position, growing up in the Middle East and coming to this country with fluency in Arabic and wearing hijab and my Islam never being questioned. However, anti-Black racism within the Muslim community looks like exclusion to me, looks like often being in a room and being the only Black Muslim there. Often it means also being invited to initiatives to be the representatives of the community or to bring the Black Muslim community, but not as decision makers, but as attendees and as volunteers and fundraisers for initiatives that are often predominantly Arab and South Asian focused.
So tell me a little bit, you brought up a good contrast. You said you were included and you did feel that they invited you, but then at the same time you felt an element of exclusion. So how do you explain sort of this, the dichotomy?
It's basically what fits right. So if I, for example, did not wear hijab and my curls were out, would I be invited into spaces where it's not only about the hijab, where someone with a straight hair and South Asian or Arab looking sisters might be invited into these spaces. Equally, if I did not speak Arabic as fluently as I do, would I be able to kind of flow through these spaces? Would my Islam be questioned, and would I be asked like, oh, are you a Muslim, or when did you convert, and all those questions? So these are the things that are subconsciously are embedded in the Muslim community of when you think about who's Muslim. I was at a conference not too long ago, and one of the questions I asked the audience is to close their eyes and to imagine a Muslim. And then I asked the audience to raise their hand if they've imagined a Muslim Black man, for example, and very few people raised their hands. So when you imagine who's a Muslim, a South Asian Arab man comes to mind, a South Asian Arab woman comes to mind. Most recently, I was at a Shopper Drug Mart advertisement commercial for the flu,
Nice.
And they were looking for a Muslim face. However, in their call, they've actually asked for South Asian representation. And a close friend of mine, who's a Black woman in production, said that, I have a friend who's Muslim and he wears hijab, but she's a Black woman. Is that still okay? And I got casted and I got the placement. However, come to think about it, this is both within and outside of the Muslim community. So when we imagine we imagine a Muslim, do we often exclude Black Muslims from that equation?
Mm-hmm. So let's get the Black Muslim male experience. What has your experience been, Kofi?
So I guess for me, my experience really begins with my own personal story, which is a story that also includes conversion to Islam. So I was raised as a non-Muslim for most of my life and came to Islam, alhamdulillah, thanks to God, about 6 years ago.
Okay, wow.
So since that process, of course, I've sort of come to learn a lot more about the Muslim community. I mean, as an outsider, you tend to think the Muslim community is sort of homogeneous. Everybody sort of gets along. You don't know about sort of the challenges that exist. So I guess I'd say that for me, as a person who, for one, whose name is not obviously Muslim, so first and foremost, a name like Kofi, people sort of wonder, are you Muslim to begin with?
Yeah.
But I guess it has a lot to do with sort of assumptions or presumptions about you, about how much your Blackness is authentically Islamic. So questions
What
about.
do you mean by that?
By that I mean, I guess if I sort of go into a mosque or a masjid and I sort of appear a certain way, I dress a certain way, I look like the typical black guy that grew up in maybe the inner city of Toronto. There's an assumption that I don't know anything about the religion or whatnot. There are questions about my understanding of sort of basic concepts of Islam. So,
Like, do you even know how to pray? Or?
I know how to play exactly, and I mean, this can be a bit of a deflating experience in many respects. But I understand that a lot of times it's maybe perhaps people don't know enough, or they don't see enough black Muslims who just look like me or talk like me, for them to sort of understand that we kind of come in different shapes and forms, including additionally, I mean, I've had some very, very overtly sort of racist experience personally, engaging with the Muslim community, and I don't want to smear the entire Muslim community. These are just sort of particular incidents, but they're enough to warrant some concern about the understanding about black people generally.
Can you give a general example just so people understand what you mean when you say, because I'm sure, when you call somebody out or you call the community out and say there is an issue of racism in the community, they're going to go on the defensive. So just to sort of, I guess make it a bit more real for people, give me just one general example.
I think a very common experience that I've seen, and this is I can sort of relate experiences of many other black Muslims, especially males, is when you are maybe seeking partnership, seeking to find someone to marry or something like that. Oftentimes, you'll the same people who are with you in the masjid or what have you now have a lot of apprehension about you maybe being considered a possible mate for their sister or their daughter or their cousin, what have you. And that kind of sort of makes you realize that you are accepted, but perhaps you can't fully be accepted as well.
So you both have talked a lot, even this incident, the Shoppers Drug Mart incident, they're individual incidences in your life, and I'm sure there are plenty that unfortunately or fortunately you guys have gone through that has brought you here today. So at what point did you guys realize that this is not an individual, I, Samia, I, Kofi, am experiencing this, but rather it's a systemic issue of racism within the Muslim community? What was the turning point? We can start with either of you.
Yeah. So I think I completely give credit to the younger generations of Muslim, and particularly black young women in our community, being extremely vocal and bringing up this issue. So conversations such as Black in the MSA, conversations like what has happened because of the comments of Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, for example, pathologizing the Muslim community, the black community, and blaming a lot of the the violence, that police brutality that occurs to the black community. So I think what happens is that othering, that continuing to say we should, as a community, we should stand with Black Lives Matters, because we know this is an issue of justice, and not recognizing that yes, Black Lives Matter is perhaps outside of your community, but as a Black Muslim, it is my community. The Black community is my community. So, I don't have to choose whether to be, what day do I need to be Black and what day do I need to be Muslim.
What about you, Kofi? Can you relate to that? Or?
Yeah, and of course. I mean, for me, this is part of the work that inshallah, God willing, I want to do and make part of my my practice of Islam is to educate a lot of people about anti-Black racism, which I kind of take almost as a fact in my own life experience. This is outside of the Islamic context. I mean, anti-Black racism, and you just need to look around the world, is clear. It's one of those sort of ugly truths and realities that we see across the world. The darker you are, the more Africanoid you look in your phenotypes. The less sort of attractive you are, the less looked upon as someone who is to be praiseworthy or is to be looked at as an example, for example, for others. So I think this is a fact. Moreover, you see aspects of this throughout the world in sort of socioeconomic statistics and data around who gets over-policed, who is undereducated or underemployed, who has worse health outcomes. So there are so many clear sort of socioeconomic sort of details and statistics worldwide that give you an indication about what the reality of anti-Black racism looks like.
And I know you're both doing a lot of work to address that. So tell me briefly, what are some of the initiatives that you guys are working on to help address this issue on a broader scale?
So some of the work that myself and a couple of other colleagues of mine have started is offering trainings, anti-oppression, anti-racism training, equity training to Muslim organizations, whether they are masjids or boards of Muslim organizations. And what we're hoping to do is basically shift some of the power dynamics in the community and start from a place of education, but also a place of accountability, that as a board members, as a leadership of a specific masjid or a mosque or organization, once you recognize this, then hopefully you are going to be doing taking some actions to change that.
So building awareness about this issue.
Yes.
And Kofi, what are you doing?
For me, I've kind of focused my work around organizing the Black Muslim community and helping others understand, I guess, the intersection of being Black and being Muslim and what that means for people in our community. When I speak, when I say our community, I'm talking about the Muslim community writ large, but helping the Muslim community understand how we have differentiated sort of experiences because we're Black and because we're Muslim at the same time.
Just as we wrap up, one question, we talked about your personal experiences growing up and the challenges you face. You guys are addressing things at a systemic level. How do you explain this? Because I know you both have kids. How do you explain this to your kids?
It's a challenge because my kid is very aware of social justice issues and what happens outside of the Muslim community.
Rightfully so, having a mom like you.
But what's difficult is that I've always painted the picture that the Muslim community is your solace, it's your place of peace, and it's where you retreat back after you have to fight all these issues outside. So it's often very difficult and disheartening to say that, yeah, you know what, you might not find peace within the Muslim community. So inshallah, God willing, what I am showing my daughter is that there is hope and we can shift these things. And this has not always been the history of the Muslim community. That we have an example to follow and we have a society that we might be able to replicate.
What about Kofi as we wrap up?
So for me, I mean, my daughters are quite young, 3 years old and 1 year old. So they're too young for me to sort of get into that conversation right now. But I think the conversations I have with my wife right now are around teaching them about the core values of the religion and principle, teaching them about how Islam ideally deals with these kinds of issues and whatnot, and helping them to understand that first before they deal with Muslims on a whole.
I think you both gave us a very solid base for this discussion, so thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Hey YouTube, we hope you benefited from this video. If you liked it, or if you didn't, let us know in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more, check out some of our other videos. And don't forget to subscribe so you can get new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.